It's 4 p.m. in my factory in Miripur, and it's inside 37 or 38 Celsius. What's happening to work and what's happening to workers as the global temperature rises and as heat waves grow in duration, intensity in places like Bangladesh. The worst effects of climate breakdown are felt by low-wage workers anywhere in the world. This difference between the adaptive industry and the non-adaptive industry, that gap gets pretty wide. By 2030, it's already a 20% difference.
So there is a high risk of the job losses. Hello everyone, good evening. So my name is Nazmul Hossain Avi. I am your host for today's discussion that we are doing regularly. And today we will be discussing with Mr. Jason Judd, who is our guest today to speak on some of the works that he has been doing as an executive director of the Cornell ILR Schools Global Labour Institute. So, and as you know, I am Ovi, who has been working on the labour market and economic policy issues in Bangladesh and also with the labour issues. So we'll be discussing a few interesting things today. Just let me introduce to our guest today, who will be the discussant. Hi Jason, how are you? And good to have you in this show with us, and for audience it will be good to hear from you on some of your works that you are doing.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we are also glad to have you here. Let me ask you about the institution you have been working with, like Global Labour Institute of Cornell ILR School. Can you explain that what this institution is doing at this moment and what are your major works around the world?
Sure. The Global Labour Institute is a research center at Cornell University, which is in New York in the United States. Our focus is the world of work and what's happening to work and to workers in global production. So we're less interested in what's happening in the United States. We're more interested in what's happening in the rest of the world. And most of our work is quantitative. We're always hunting for data that can help us see what's happening, an analysis that can help us see what's changing in the world of work and how life and work is changing for workers, their employers, buyers of their goods, investors.
Oh, that's amazing, and that's exactly the right moment that you have come to our country, where the country is also focusing a lot and giving a lot of efforts on improving the working conditions, workers' rights, and it's been a long time that during the development of the ready-made garment industry and all, Bangladesh has been one of the most labor-intensive countries, as you already know. So I think it's a good time to have you on discussing some of the important issues that you may give us good hints and suggestions throughout your experience and work. I think going forward, I know from my personal engagement with you on some of the works, and I have been following Cornell's work for a long time in my personal capacity and professional capacity as well. Now currently there is a big debate in the world that climate change, climate adaptiveness is not only important from the environmental aspect, but it has a direct link to the labor issues, employment, jobs, industrial growth and whatnot. So how do you see the issue of heat, climate, flood as important element to the discussion of the labor market issues globally, and of course for the countries like Bangladesh and many of its neighborhoods?
Labor specialists, data scientists, economists. We're not climate scientists. When we first went looking for labor issues in the climate crisis, or discussion of the climate crisis, we didn't find any. What I mean by that is in the apparel industry, right, in RMG, here in Bangladesh, but globally, all the attention until recently was on decarbonization, we call mitigation. All of the money, all of the energy, all of the programs, all of the pressure was about reducing the industry's carbon footprint, which is massive. But missing in that was what's happening to work and what's happening to workers as the global temperature rises and as heat waves grow in duration and intensity in places like Bangladesh. But Bangladesh is in company of many other apparel producing countries. It's one of the largest, but there are 50 places around the world where apparel is produced for export, and most of them are in this wide tropical, subtropical band, right, countries that are vulnerable to extreme heat and intense flooding. And when we went looking for evidence that the industry or governments or workers were thinking about these problems and looking for ways to tackle them, the problems of adaptation as opposed to mitigation, dealing with the effects of climate breakdown now. We didn't find a lot. That was 4 or 5 years ago. Beginning to change, and adaptation and the risk that high heat poses, the harms that high heat is already causing in the lives of workers, their families, intense flooding. Those issues are moving up the list because everybody everywhere is feeling their effects. Not in the same way, not to the same degree. The worst effects of climate breakdown are felt by low-wage workers anywhere in the world.
Right.
Yeah, it's a problem first of poverty.
Now, thanks for giving the background that how did you start from the institution and from yourself to looking into the things of climate change and heat stress, getting into the labor connectivity and workers and poverty related aspects to those climate related issues. And now from what I saw in some of your recent works with the center as well with the other colleagues, as also the countries in South Asia and some of the East Asian countries are some priorities for some of your current and ongoing works on heat stress, how it is affecting the industrial workers. So would you think that Bangladesh is a different case from some of the neighboring countries in Asia and East Asia, or Bangladesh is somewhat more vulnerable compared to the other countries where you are working, or maybe it is the same like the other countries in the region?
Yeah.
What would you say?
2 rounds of research. One largely on our own, another with Schroders, which is a fund manager based in the UK, and also with Brack University here in Dhaka. We were interested in 2 questions. The first question was what's happening to heat, and specifically heat waves in these 4 countries. We chose Bangladesh, Cambodia, Pakistan, and Vietnam. We looked back over the last 20 years. What is the data? What does climate science tell us about high heat and rainfall and flooding over the last 20 years? Is it getting better? Possibly, not likely. Is it getting worse? And in that round of research, we calculated the sort of heat humidity index, the wet bulb temperature. That helps us measure heat stress for workers in apparel working indoors. And we saw in those 4 countries, in the major apparel producing centers in those countries, that the number of days on which the temperature, the wet bulb, this heat humidity combination would rise to dangerous levels. The number of days per year was climbing over the last 20 years. Not at the same rate in all those 5 places. We looked at Dhaka, Phnom Penh, Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, and Karachi. And of the 5, Karachi has the most extreme outcome. Highest number of extreme heat days per year. But not far behind them, or following a similar trajectory, is Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. Phnom Penh and Dhaka had relatively lower levels and slower growth, but still the number of high heat days is growing. And you don't need a social scientist or a climate scientist to tell you this. If you're living in any of these places, you can feel it.
Right, absolutely.
You can feel that sort of year on year the number of high heat days is growing. There's some variation. You can get some pretty big swings year to year, but the trend is clearly upward. So to answer your question, in that group of 4 countries, Bangladesh is in good company. All of those major competitors in RMG exports face similar problems. Yeah.
Right.
And then the second question was, okay, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
The last 20 years have brought high heat, have brought intense flooding. What will the next 20, 25 years look like? Yeah.
Right.
So for that, we teamed up with Schroders and their analysts to look first at 2030. How many high heat days would we expect in those countries by 2030 and then by 2050? And we used a flood model that would show us how high floodwaters would rise based on a routine flood event, a 1 or 2 year flood event, or a 5-year event, a 10-year event, a 50-year flood. And we're able to measure, sort of factory by factory, what the flood risk is. And then we can calculate sort of the economic damage or the risk that high heat and intense flooding present factory by factory. And we can add up the number of high heat days, we can add up the number of flood interruptions, and each one of those days, high heat days or a flood day, has an economic cost. Workers are slowing down, our bodies slow down in high heat, or flooding interrupts getting to work, or it closes the factory or a highway for a day or a week at a time. We're able to add up those projected economic costs and come up with a figure for each of the countries, how much economic damage, or what's the potential loss by 2030 and 2050 if the industry does nothing to fix the problem. So an industry that invests in flood defenses, an apparel industry that invests in cooling factories and keeping workers healthy and safe, will continue to grow at a historically healthy rate in all 4 of those countries. But industries that don't and are succumbing to high heat and intense flooding, they're going to grow at a much slower rate. And this difference between the adaptive industry and the non-adaptive industry, that gap gets pretty wide. By 2030, it's already a 20% difference. And then by 2050, it yawns out to almost 65, 67% across those 4 countries. And there's not only the loss of export earnings for the industry, for the economy, there's also jobs that would have been created under the faster, healthier growth curve that aren't created.
So there is a high risk of the job losses because of jobs will not be created.
Yeah, that's right. So jobs that would have been created under a healthier adaptive industry aren't created. And the gap is in Bangladesh by 2030, 250,000 jobs, and by 2050, 1.25 million.
Oh, that's a big number if you compound the number with the existing joblessness that the country already has. I mean, 2 million people enter into the labor market every year on an average.
RMG here has been a huge driver of formal employment over the last 30 years. So to lose that or to see it slow is a risk from a development perspective.
No, thank you. And I think that exactly this is a very timely discussion that we are having now. Just getting into this economic loss and economic growth trajectories disruption related to the climate adaptiveness and mitigation. On the labor-related issues, how do you see from a perspective of workers' welfare loss because of this heat stress and temperature rise? Even it can happen to their houses and where they live besides the factory heat. So if there is any potential threat to the long-lasting health issues of a worker who is working in the industry and also living in a heat stress in her house or his house, so how do you see these things, and what would be a good research to investigate those, to come up with some solutions and recommendations?
So for every one conversation we've had with a factory manager or with a buyer's representative, we've had 5 or 10 with workers, not just here in Bangladesh, but in other places. And the answers are similar. Workers know that it's getting hotter, and they know that it's having an effect on their output. There's the very short-term effect. It's 4 p.m. in my factory in Miripur, and it's inside 37 or 38 Celsius, and I'm slowing down. I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling dizzy, I'm feeling dehydrated. My output is falling. So that's the very short-term impact, and that compounds over many days. When I'm at home at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or midnight, it's still 36 or 37 or 38 Celsius inside my home. I'm not able to sleep comfortably, and when I get up in the morning, I'm just as tired as I was when I went to bed, but I have to head to the factory and work in the high heat one more day. That compounds and has longer-term health effects. So there's just the productivity loss, then there's health impacts, and when flooding is added to the mix, my neighborhood is more like, as a worker, my neighborhood is more likely to flood than the neighborhood where the factory sits. Maybe it's in an industrial park, maybe drainage defends it against flooding, but not my home. And workers develop rashes and respiratory issues from wastewater, and that can slow them down at work, but it can also lead to long-term health issues that lead to days or weeks of work lost, which means income loss. Yeah, right. And the fear of that means workers are pushing themselves, even though the heat is very high, even though they're tired. It means they're spending more in the hottest months and in the rainiest months to sort of power through, which means, in short, more spending on medicine. So not a healthy cycle. And workers see this and know this, and managers are also recognizing it. So when we have these conversations, whether it's with workers or managers or buyers, there's a recognition that this is a problem that's touching everyone.
No, of course. I mean, this is well described, and as you said that, of course, in Bangladesh, there is obviously a tendency for many people, including the middle class or even the upper middle class, for many diseases and health-related problems. They usually go to the pharmaceutical shop and buy, medicines directly without seeing doctors, and that can be another risk for workers of the ready-made garments, feeling simple health issues, going to the medical centers and buying some medicines which have long-term damage and higher risk to develop in their bodies for the longer period. So that's well explained. And I think, do you think that it is something which should be considered by the social protection or some measures, some sort of incentives from the government side, or I exactly don't know from which kind of combination of financing and schemes can come, but do you think that any initiative such this to compensate for this kind of health related issues or stress due to heat can be feasible?
In that group of countries that we studied closely, two of them have set clear thresholds, clear standards for heat in manufacturing. Pakistan is one, and Vietnam is the other. And in Vietnamese law, the upper limit for indoor temperatures for workers doing apparel, making apparel or shoes, is 32 Celsius. It's not a hard limit, but at 32, the government recognizes that the risk of short or longer term damage to workers is growing. Cool the factory, it needs to allow more rest, it needs to provide more water. There are protocols. Yeah. Right. The other two countries in our study, Bangladesh and Cambodia, do not have standards.
I mean, they do not have any heat thresholds or standards.
Yeah. So in Bangladeshi law, it says that in the RMG sector, the temperature should be tolerable. So if you're a manager, you don't know what, you're not sure. Yeah, a worker and a manager may have a different opinion of what's tolerable. And a labor inspector won't have a standard to measure it. It's not meaningful regulation. Cambodia is the same. It uses, I think the term there is comfortable. Yeah. So the first step for a government is to set a meaningful standard that can be measured against and enforced. That's low-hanging fruit here in Bangladesh, where 4 million workers are in Tier 1 apparel factories. The second approach is also, it's a policy response. Workers need help in order to stay ahead of the worst effects of climate breakdown. Right. So a home that's 37 or 38 Celsius overnight needs lots of things, and that may not be in the power of workers to fix. They may not be able to replace the roof or add an additional fan. The most important and the most adaptive policy response in this case is living wages. Workers should be able to afford housing that is safe. And we've met many who are paying 3,000 or 4,000 taka per month for homes that are too hot at night, where the electricity isn't constant. So that's the single most important, or the second most important policy response after setting a clear standard that employers have to follow and that the government will enforce. There are lots of other things. There are 10 other things that governments, employers, brands, and unions can do, but those are the top two on my list.
So thanks for this discussion for this episode. We'll discuss about some other things in the next episode, and hope you stay with us for the next episode. Thank you.